In the royal capital of Paluma, where semi-humans are treated as scum by the human population and forced to work for free, a young merchant holds a different view of these despised creatures. One of these monsters asks young Banaza if this is the last load, and he replies that perhaps it is, depending on the negotiations. Thus, he instructs the workers to have a meal while awaiting further instructions. The human bosses see Banaza giving lunch money to the semi-human and find it pathetic. The semi-human himself recalls his own race and refuses payment, feeling unworthy. But Banaza insists it is deserved. By the boy's side, Quinn clarifies that when Banaza says something, he doesn't accept a no as an answer, so the deal is to accept the money and enjoy the meal. Thus, the workers will finally have a decent meal. Despite the good attitude, other humans see Banaza's actions as hypocritical, and he doesn't understand the reason for such discrimination against the other race. While Quinn explains that this prejudice is typical of the capital, Banaza is transported by a strange magic that affects his body. As soon as he arrives in a new world, a voice confirms that the summoning of candidate number 198 as the great hero was a success. Soon, Banaza is welcomed into the magical kingdom of Clyrode. The humble merchant thinks this is all a mistake, but the kingdom's representative states that the battle against the Dark Army is imminent, hence potential heroes from other worlds are called to defeat the Demon Lord's army. Next, a servant arrives with an artifact to evaluate the young man's abilities, and the representative explains that candidates receive divine blessings from the gods in exchange for returning to level 1 after being summoned. This blessing is called Divine Revelation and grants powers impossible to acquire through training. Interestingly, Banaza is able to read this foreign language, where a sign displays his abilities, but the servant notes that no divine revelation has occurred because the statistics shown are those of an ordinary man. Banaza explains that's exactly what he was trying to say, but the residents of Clyrode feel they have failed with this summons. In this case, Banaza asks if it's possible to send him back, but at that moment, all eyes turn to a candidate who has demonstrated powers worthy of a legendary hero. When this candidate looks at Banaza's statistics, he concludes that he will be the one to save this world. Shortly after, the king himself is aware of the arrival of the long-awaited hero, who will save the kingdom from the clutches of the Demon Lord, and Banaza has no idea what to do because nobody listens to the boy, and they simply left him stranded in this unknown world. In the late afternoon, Banaza is thrown into a dark carriage. Earlier, the king had explained to him that the gate through which he was summoned had been closed and could not be reopened. Since this failure is considered a great failure for the nation, Banaza will be sent to Delaveza Forest, where he will live the rest of his life and is forbidden to speak to anyone about this failure. So traveling to his destination, Banaza asks if the coachman has a slave pact with the king because in his old world, this was common among humans and semi-humans. The creature laughs at the question and comments that this world seems to be a horrible place, but in Clyrode he may be underpaid, but he's not a slave. In this kingdom, humans and semi-humans have equal rights. Then he asks about this Delaveza forest, but the semi-human ends the dialogue by closing the window on the poor boy's face. Afterward, he recalls how humans treat the other races inferior in his world and thinks that this world doesn't seem worse than his, even though there's this demon lord. Finally, 20 days pass on this journey to the distant forest where Banaza was exiled, and upon arrival, Banaza receives from the coachman a magic bag with money and food to sustain him for a while, and is warned that rumors indicate the presence of the demon lord's army in the area. For this reason, the coachman advises the human to leave as soon as possible. Despite everything, Banaza has nowhere to run, so he analyzes his magic bag to see the equipment. Among other things, he received food, construction materials, and cultivation tools, and the first thing he takes out is a sword that is quite nice, but certainly of poor quality. Suddenly, 3 slimes appear behind the boy, which, since they exist in Banaza's world, he thinks are harmless. But they advance towards the human and force him to defend himself, defeating them one by one with his sword. Just in this small fight, the young man's sword had already been quite damaged. But at least he receives the news that he has leveled up. Observing the menu, he wonders what that symbol of 2 glued circles means, while receiving permission to activate voice guidance. Excited to have someone to talk to, Banaza is thrilled with the tool, and is soon notified by it that he has received 2 magical tracking spells, Monster Attraction and Force Recovery. Banaza believes that these abilities were what attracted the slimes, and considering they gave him a terrible sword, the merchant concludes that they obviously want him dead. However, the system offers the possibility to remove these spells from the bag, so the exile orders to remove both without a second thought. This makes Banaza wonder why they would put these easily removable spells in the first place, but nothing makes sense in his head. At the moment, he needs to find a place to take cover, but before he enters Delaveza Forest, The system warns that it is contaminated with a high concentration of malicium, a generic name for liquid or gaseous substances emitted by demons, causing serious damage to humanoid races. Therefore, the system offers to purify the forest, and without any idea of how he is allowed to request this, Banaza does not refuse the proposal. This spell will consume a third of the exile's magic, but he's not a supreme dark mage, so this lost mana simply won't be missed. Soon, an extremely intense magical energy sweeps across the entire Delaveza forest, and in a few seconds, the intense light had exterminated all impurities from the area. With this extraordinary feat, the merchant levels up so much that the system stacks notifications of level up that almost threaten to knock the poor boy to the ground. In the meantime, the first princess of Clyrode reports to the king the cruelty of exiling that hero candidate for a mistake committed by the kingdom itself, especially due to the rumors of demonic forces setting up their frontline base there. Suddenly, a subordinate alerts that the purification, the highest sacred magic of all, has just been used. With the news, the king thinks that the great hero of the golden hair has just subdued the army of the demon lord, but in reality, the spell was not used in the south, where this hero is heading, but rather in a forest in the extreme north. Meanwhile, in a forest in the extreme north, Banaza reaches level 367 without moving a single muscle, and he notices that the strange symbol in the system still hasn't changed. Soon he decides to disable the level up notification so his brain won't fry, and when he questions how much mana he still lacks, the system shows his magic being fully restored in a few seconds. Then the system offers the appearance change magic. So he accepts the opportunity to no longer be recognized by the kingdom of Clyrode, and to ensure that this happens, he chooses the female gender to remodel himself, gaining prominent physical attributes. However, he realizes that he won't be able to stop looking at himself in the mirror if he remains in this form, so he returns to the male gender, and his remodeling will allow him to enter and leave Clyrode without being recognized as Banaza. Next, the system indicates the teleportation spell to take the young man back to the capital, and being no fool, the merchant embraces the easy life and bolts from the forest. Upon arriving in the royal capital, Banaza is impressed to have used a magic that only the most powerful wizards could invoke in his old world. Thinking about it, he gets the idea to use the same ability to return to his original universe. But when nothing happens upon commanding the order, the young man realizes that's asking too much. Anyway, now he needs to think of a way to make money to survive in this world, so he sets out to find an adventurer's guild to do monster hunting or cargo transport missions. At this moment, the system reappears to continue the easy life, showing the way to the Clyrode Adventurers Guild for the humble merchant. Arriving there, he is informed that the guild ranks adventurers who rise in rank by completing missions, and as they rise in rank, they can accept more difficult and better-paying missions. So Banaza registers and almost uses his original name, but manages to correct himself in time and chooses the alias Fleo, the name of his dog. Therefore, Fleo is finally registered in the Adventurers Guild, then receives a pendant where his information is stored. With that resolved, he starts looking for his first jobs until he finds a young girl asking for company to take her to the Delaveza forest. The girl even offers money for the escort, but no one volunteers for this service, considering the rumors about the presence of demonic forces in the region. A semi-human comments that a kingdom's Dominion force will be sent soon, but the girl cannot wait because her family lives nearby and is in great danger. Even with this plea for help, the duo of adventurers pushes the girl away when they get tired of her insistence. Then Fleo appears with his unparalleled charm to save the maiden's day. With everyone around looking amazed, Fleo asserts that he can teleport the two to the forest, and this makes the entire guild wonder how a kid like him could do that. At that moment, a member of the Royal Knights named Balirosa tells Fleo to stay away from the girl, because certainly the guy doesn't seem skilled enough to summon such advanced magic. She and her companions assume the man is planning to kidnap the poor girl, so Fleo tries to clear his name by introducing himself and inviting everyone to join this journey. Fleo keeps his word by teleporting the group to the forest. Because of using this magic, a witch asks if he is a wizard of the highest level, but Fleo replies that he's just a newbie who is a fan of magic. Then, everyone apologizes for misjudging the adventurer, and the little girl notices that the Molicium of the forest has disappeared. Fleo is going to explain what happened, but the system warns that it's dangerous to inform a demon that he used the purification. Fleo doesn't understand why the girl would be a demon, while Balirosa and the other women point their weapons at the child. The merchant tries to understand what's going on, then the leader of the women tells that the guild warned about a suspicious young girl who requested assistance to travel to the Delaveza forest. With that, the child loses her innocent expression and introduces herself as Fenris, the younger sister of Fengaril, with the four infernals. Fenris says that her brother sent her to observe the enemy and find food, but now she'll have to eliminate these meddlers. Then she releases a cloud of militium that knocks down all the human combatants, but Fleo remains standing, and therefore the wolf promises to deal with him after defeating everyone around. The wolf tries to devour Balerosa, but the adventurer saves the woman on time. Despite that, he can't fight and protect everyone at the same time, so he orders the system to teleport everyone back to the castle of Clyrode. After that, Fenris asks if a human wanted to stay to become lunch, but the young man promises not to die until he finds out what really happened to him. Until then, he will test every spell he can. And the first thing he uses is the meteoric leap to escape from an attack by the gigantic wolf. Jumping over the beast, she tries to hit Fleo with her tail, but he summons an earth wall to protect himself and counterattacks with a whirlwind. When Fenris breaks free, Fleo casts a gravity magic and manages to trap the giant beast on the ground. Facing this, he needs to think quickly how to defeat the enemy, so the system recommends a subjugation magic that enslaves the target and allows you to control their thoughts and actions. Remembering the suffering of the semi-humans in his world, Fleo refuses the recommendation and asks for another, while Fenris tries to break free from the imposed gravity. However, the system insists on the same enslavement magic, and as the wolf seeks to strengthen itself with its magic, Fleo doesn't know what to do because he refuses to come to this world and make the same mistake as the inhabitants of his land. However, Fenris loses her mana trying to break free from the gravity, and giving up, she asks the human to execute her because there's no path in life for a warrior who can't fight. In response, Fleo reveals that he doesn't even like to fight and releases the beast. Fenris questions whether he will spare a demon, a natural enemy of humanity, but Fleo doesn't care if it's a demon or a man. He won't kill someone who has surrendered. Facing this, Fenris remarks how innocent the boy is and shortly after reassumes her human form. Fleo covers the girl who was left naked after the transformation and asks her to swear not to engage in conflicts with humans anymore, as he will allow her to go wherever she wants. Then he opens his bag in search of clothes for her, but she faints from mana exhaustion. Therefore, he sets up a camp for the girl to rest while he evaluates his magic in the menu. Remembering the teleportation spell that caused such a stir in the Adventurers Guild, Fleo wonders why he has such an advanced ability. Upon awakening, Fenris opens the tent curtain and observes the human, reflecting that not even she got any chance against him, even though she was sure humans were a fragile race. So with her mana completely restored, she tells Fleo that anyone else would have killed her and skinned her. Therefore, she decides to become the human's servant and promises not to engage in conflicts with his species anymore. Upon hearing her call Fleo master, he makes it clear that he doesn't need any slaves, but Fenris uses the same strategy as Shrek's kitten, making a pitiful face, but the boy remains firm in his decision. Facing this, Fenris announces that only death remains and tries to slit her throat with one of her claws, prompting Fleo to change his mind and invite her to accompany him. Shortly after, Fleo explains that he came from another world, summoned as a candidate for a great hero, but they saw that he had no abilities and exiled him to the forest. Since then, he has used magic to alter his appearance and not be identified by the kingdom of Clyrode. Therefore, Fenris will regret it if she decides to follow the boy. However, the girl doesn't care about any of that because one rule of the Lupines is to live for their master until the end of their days. Thus, Fenris definitively asks Fleo to let her stay by his side, and when he asks her back if she really wants that, the girl embraces him as an answer. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Clyrode, the great hero informs the king that his forces sent to attack the army of the demon lord were defeated, so he wants to know what kind of soldiers those granted by the crown are. After all, they panicked and broke formation upon seeing a simple magical beast, and thus were exterminated. Faced with this, the king questions if all the blame really falls on the soldiers, so the great hero replies that the sovereign should be thankful for bringing some of them back alive. After the departure of the famous warrior, the king asks a soldier how the hero performed in battle, and the soldier reports that he remained at the rear of the army the whole time, and when the conflict broke out, he fled while his troops fought for their lives and even blamed those who stayed behind. In the meantime, the golden-haired great hero is enraged because he's been training non-stop for a month, but his skills are only strong enough to fight against humans or weak magical beasts. At that moment, a woman named Suya arrives and the hero apologizes for making her wait. In turn, Suya responds that waiting is one of her duties as his servant, so the hero decides to offer her all the luxuries he can afford with the castle's money. The next day, Fleo points out that he needs to earn money to live in this world, so he will get a job at the guild and then pay for an inn to spend the night. Fenris clarifies that she will be accompanying the master, but he says he doesn't like being called that. But as he was about to say his name, a merchant offers freshly harvested vegetables to his wife. Fenris doesn't understand why she was called a wife, so Fleo explains that the guy thought they were married, and it might be interesting to make people think that way so they can travel without raising too many suspicions. Without hesitation, Fenris accepts the invitation because there is no greater honor for a lupine woman than to have a strong husband. Fleo reminds her that it would be just pretense, but the girl already starts calling the boy dear. When they arrive at the Adventurers Guild, Fenris signs up as a member and finds it intriguing the cord that humans wear to identify themselves, and Fleo shows his to the girl. Fenris thinks they match because they both have a similar cord, so she remembers a wedding ritual of her race where the couple swallows some bones of a prey they hunted together, and having matching accessories reminded her of that. At that moment, the guild attendant asks Fenris what name she will use on the registry, and as she was about to say her real name to the woman, Fleo interrupts in time and replies that she will use the nickname Riz. After that, while looking for a job, the girl apologizes for forgetting to hide her real name, but still, Fleo believes that no one will discover her identity with this human transformation. By the way, he will need her to act like one, so he asks for the servants' cooperation. Suddenly, a woman announces an urgent mission because a large group of psycho bears has been spotted to the north heading towards the kingdom. According to rumors, the psycho bears were responsible for destroying the army of the great hero, so the adventurers hesitate to take on this task. As it is an urgent mission, the guild representative opens it up to any rank willing to take it and doubles the reward for each bear slain tenfold. Fleo finds this a lucrative proposal but prefers to avoid these bears as he believes he is not capable of facing them. However, Fenris volunteers to go alone, persuading the human to change his mind and accompany the servant on the journey. Upon arriving in the forest where the psycho bears were last seen, the duo approaches a village where the empty house provided by the guild for the adventurers of this mission is located. Planning to make the house their base, Fenris is confident that the two of them together are capable of even facing the demon lord himself, until they hear a distant scream and go to investigate its source. Below the cliff, a known group of knights is surrounded by psycho bears, and Fenris suggests they ignore this group because they seem too weak. Down below, Bellerosa asks Blossom to retreat as she is severely injured, and using only one arm to wield her heavy sword, the girl ends up being knocked down by a bear, but Fleo saves her with his lightning magic. Later, another bear attacks Bolano, the group's mage, so Fenris crushes the creature with a stomp. With the conflict resolved, Bellerosa realizes it's Fleo, so the team thanks him for saving them once again. Bellerosa confesses she was worried about leaving the boy alone against that evil beast, although she believed he can handle it on his own. Hearing the way she was addressed, Fenris ends up expressing her anger, so Fleo reveals that this girl is Riz, his travel companion, leaving her nervous for not being introduced as his wife. The anger was so much that as another psycho bear approaches, the demon looks into the beast's eyes with a sinister expression and makes the bear faint on the spot. Moreover, the bear surrenders to the girl and makes the same gaze she made with Fleo, so she wishes to make this bear a new subordinate or a pet. After all, psycho bears are fierce pests known to have decimated the army of the great hero, so they will be very useful. While the team of women trembles in fear, Fleo decides to prevent the bear from attacking more people, so he uses a restraint magic to keep the animal under control, and soon after uses his appearance-changing magic to turn the beast into a small animal that is far from causing panic. Fenris asks what the name of the creature will be, so Fleo suggests Sai because it's related to the race's name. Observing the scene, Bellerosa doesn't understand how those two not only dealt with all the psycho bears but also tamed one. Therefore, the warrior approaches to ask a favor. Back at the base, she thanks Fleo for saving them twice, so she decides to formally introduce herself to the boy. She is Bellerosa, a knight of Clyrode, while Blossom uses the muscles she gained from heavy farm work to serve on the front line. Neither used to take care of the army's horses until becoming a warrior, and Bolano is a sorceress specializing in defensive magic. Soon, the leader of the group reveals that she would like Fleo's training because after being defeated in battle, the great hero announced that he will only face the demon lord accompanied by warriors who can be his right hand, and then locked himself in the fortress. Therefore, the king stipulated that the army must train until they are able to defeat psycho bears, and as they are not yet capable, the women want Fleo's help. The boy wonders how he will teach if he doesn't even know how to use his magic, while Fenris shows her demonic anger at the audacity of the girls to flirt with her man in her head. In response, Fleo takes the opportunity to make it clear that all he wants is to have a life with his wife Riz, so the demon calms down. The girls are surprised and lament not being able to be trained for this reason. However, Fenris herself encourages the training because no one knows better than her how much this boy helps those in need, and as his wife, it is her duty to respect his decision. Thus, Fleo decides to welcome the team, and after celebrating the news, the girls ask to stay at his house because it is dangerous to camp in these surroundings full of walls. Fleo thinks he's in trouble, but Fenris says there's no problem at all because there are enough rooms there. Meanwhile, the subordinate named Eulimenes informs her master, the demon king, that the purification spell that annihilated Fengarel's army in the Delaveza forest was not invoked by the mages of Clyrode. In fact, it was a specific person. Faced with this, the demon lord is surprised by the ability of one human to do this, so he orders Eulimenes to capture this individual. Speaking of the subject, Fleo wakes up in the company of Riz, who seemed to be waiting for the kid to wake up like a crocodile, looks at a zebra. Fleo questions this behavior, but in the girl's head, nothing could be more normal than this, since now they're a couple. At that moment, the guy remembers last night when Riz asked him to sit next to her on the bed, because according to her, she would be willing to surrender body and soul to her master. Fleo backs off and refuses the proposal, making the lupine think she's not loved, but soon he explains that these things take time with stages that should be respected. Rightly so, Riz complains that human relationships are complicated, and the kid proves it by going to sleep in the hallway. However, she comments that the others will doubt their relationship if they see him wandering around freely, which forces the poor guy to turn around. Without giving him a second of rest, the girl reminds him that it's time to change clothes and pulls his shirt mercilessly, just as Balerosa walks in without knocking on the door to talk about training, but has to leave immediately upon witnessing that scene. Later, when the training really begins, Balerosa draws her sword against a huge boar and declares herself a knight of Clyrode, but the beast doesn't seem very intimidated by this title, making the blonde run away. Blossom shows more courage and steps forward with her heavy sword, while Riz tells Bolano to create a shield to save her companion's skin. Then Fleo tells Baileri to act, so she shoots an arrow at the boar that had the same effect as a paper ball. To make matters worse, the group's mage runs out of mana, so Blossom is left alone to tank the gigantic wild pig, and thus he makes the team practice running by force. After the training, Fleo shows the girls their new room, because the reward for executing the Psycho Bears guaranteed it good enough payment to afford a new house. At that moment, Riz goes upstairs to call everyone for dinner, and all they see being served are several raw steaks from the boar they just hunted. Fleo comments that they prefer it a bit more cooked than that, so he leaves his wife resting and prepares to cook with Balerosa, while Saib agrees with the lupine that raw meat is much tastier. Sometime later, everyone is impressed with the banquet served on the table, and Fleo praises Balerosa's talent for cooking. She tells them that her family didn't have a penny, despite being noble, so she ended up being in charge of cooking, and that made her learn many things. When lunch officially begins, everyone devours the meal eagerly, but Riz thinks that this salad is turtle food, something for a clueless herbivore. After insisting a bit, Fleo manages to convince his wife to try it, so it only takes a second for her to surrender to the wonders of human cuisine, with her seasoned salad and the meat rare with blood splattering through the entrails. The problem was when she heard that Balerosa roasted the meat, so jealousy knocked on the door and made the lupine ask to roast it next time. As they arrive at the guild with a pile of mountain boars, the group surprises everyone around with this productive hunt, but Fleo ends up attracting more attention than he would like with it. While the guild evaluates the hunt, Riz asks to make a quick stop in the city to solve a personal problem, until Leolith, a guild employee, asks to have a word with the human. So while Fleo accompanies the Catman, Riz commits to giving her all on her mission. Talking with Leolith, Fleo hears that his exploits are spreading throughout the kingdom, so Clyrode would like to have the boy in service of the great hero, thus receiving the title of honorary knight. After all, it's not every day that you see a duo of adventurers of this age defeating Ranka monsters. Fleo evaluates the proposal, but decides to decline because he has no reason to conflict with the demons, especially since his wife is one. Stepping out of the guild, the adventurer finds Riz all dirty from head to toe. The boy asks if she was run over by a carriage, but she was actually taking cooking classes, where the teacher taught that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Riz struggles to learn to cook, but she simply has no knack for it, so she smashes the tomato with her hand, throws the entire pot of flour onto the meat, and finally explodes the pot that stained her whole body. Later, the great hero is at a tea party with his friends until he hears the latest gossip in the kingdom about a duo that has been making headlines in Clyrode with their talent, so the hero wishes for his subordinates to arrive as soon as possible to resume the attacks against the demons. A month later, representatives of the kingdom keep coming back to Fleo's house to convince the adventurers to join forces with Clyrode, but the boy keeps rejecting the proposal. After another offer, Fleo goes to check on the garden he's setting up in the backyard, and Blossom is helping with the soil to compensate for everything the adventurer has done for them. Together with Saib, she asks them to take care of the cultivation, and Fleo thinks her work is so good that he starts to believe she takes the garden more seriously than sword training. Inside the forest, Riz tries to convince Baileris to use a family of birds as a target, but the girl feels sorry for killing the little animals she finds so cute and innocent. Riz argues that the meat of this bird is soft and succulent. but the archer stands firm as Clyrode's first vegan. As for the group's mage, Bylera receives a magic ring from Fleo to increase her mana, and he asks her to use it in today's training to see the difference. Unfocused, or maybe not, Byleris was about to put the ring on her ring finger, but Riz was on her tail to prevent it. Finally, Balirosa was getting beaten up by a giant larva and begging Fleo for help, but it's Riz who saves the knight, who, without showing patience, tells Balirosa to stop playing the damsel in distress, as it's just a trick to get her husband's attention. The knight is left puzzled while Eulimenes moves hidden in the bushes. During lunch, everyone is surprised by Lupina's enormous progress in her culinary skills. She explains that she spent all that time practicing whenever she could, and that she used to think it was a simple activity that could be solved with magic. However, she soon discovered that not everything could be done with that kind of shortcut. In the end, it was great to learn something that didn't involve decapitating enemies and, as a bonus, still please her husband with a spicy curry dish. Meanwhile, outside, Eulimenes recognizes Fenris, the most formidable warrior of the Demon Lord, surrounded amiably by humans. To her surprise, Riz herself was aware of her presence and quickly invites the demon to have tea. Fleo is astonished to discover that Eulimenes is an assistant to the Demon Lord, so she explains that she was just observing the surroundings and ended up there by chance. In turn, Riz reveals that she married the man next to her, leaving her former army companion stunned. Riz then asks if Eulimenes has any intention of interfering with that. Eulimenes denies the accusation while burning her tongue on the tea, which Riz comments is at the perfect temperature. Observing her surroundings, Eulimenes reflects that Fenris has become a different person since leaving the army, and she finds it surprising that this man isn't afraid in the presence of two demons. But what's worse is that she can't gauge his abilities with her power of assessment, as not even the Demon Lord escapes that. To push the mission forward, Eulimenes drops a hint and comments that she didn't encounter any monsters in the Delaveza forest. Fleo remarks that then her purification worked, causing the demoness to spit out her tea in astonishment. She then reminds Fenris that it was this human who killed her brother, Fengaris, along with the troops accompanying him. Riz orders her former comrade to shut up, but by this point, Fleo wants to know what she's talking about. Riz reveals that she already suspected this because few humans are capable of casting a purification spell. She explains that her brother, Fenraris, is one of the 4 infernals, but it was his own fault for being defeated. Therefore, when she suffered the same fate, Riz decided to make Fleo her master to admire his strength. Eavesdropping behind the door, the girls' team is left in shock by this revelation, with Bilano even fainting at the plot twist. Meanwhile, Eulimenes realizes that Fenris has become an enemy and then challenges Fleo to a duel to test the power of Fenris' chosen one. The boy's wife warns that this demon wants to kill her husband using this excuse, but the servant of the Demon Lord still manages to arrange the duel, establishing free use of magic and declaring that the loser is the one who gives up first. With that said, Eulimenes launches the venomous cat claws at her opponent, planning to distract him while attacking from below with another spell. However, Fleo dissipates both spells with a snap of his fingers, and then casts the crucifixion on his opponent, immobilizing her. He then makes it clear that he will never allow anyone to harm his wife, while the rival surrenders. The next day, the homeowner tells the girls that he didn't reveal Riz's true identity to avoid trouble, but he understands if they want to report it to the kingdom. But before anything else, Riz announces that she no longer serves the Demon Lord because she has decided to serve her husband. Balirasa recalls that their duty as Clyrode Knights is to report such things, but they don't see any malice in this case. Blossom adds that their group has already discussed it, and they all agree to let it go because Fenris helped them a lot with their training, and it would be unfair to turn against someone who helped them so much. Although the girls are on Lupina's side, her former partner does not share the sentiment, so she returns the next morning with a legion of dragons from the Demon Lord to fulfill her mission of killing the human and his traitorous wife. Balirasa mentions that this legion was responsible for decimating countless human battalions in the past, while Eulimenes offers surrender to their enemies. However, Fleo's only feeling is excitement at seeing a dragon up close for the first time in his life. Eulimenes is furious at the disregard and attacks with a fireball, prompting the human to respond with the sacred magic of the divine hammer, frying most of the most powerful legion of demonic dragons in a second. The rest that survived flee without a second thought, leaving Eulimenes behind to run for her life. Riz curses Eulimenes for trying to kill her husband again, while Blossom would love to be able to hit one of those dragons to name her scythe the Dragon Reaper. Then Fleo speaks up and tells her to throw the scythe at the winged beast, and as soon as she does, the adventurer buffs the tool with speed, piercing ability, and sacred element, giving it enough power for the scythe to pierce through the neck of the flying beast. With that, Blossom truly earns the title of Dragon Reaper, and the rest of the group rushes to take their turn to do the same, but the flying monsters had already left. Seeing Balderosa lament on the other side of her reflective skull, The demon lord discovers that this human isn't even the great hero, yet he can still cast spells of such a high level. For this reason, the lord decides to act and take the next step. Meanwhile, anticipating an attack at any moment, Fleo erects a magical barrier around his home, while Riz vows to shoo that demon cat out of the house with a broom if it returns. But the truth is, the demon terrorizes the lupine's mind. For this and other reasons, Riz thinks Fleo was too kind in letting Illuminas go after the last attack. However, he refrained from executing the enemy because of what she had said about him destroying Fenrir's brother. Despite this, he decides not to reveal anything to his wife, who then calls him back home. Meanwhile, Blossom still can't believe she earned the title of Dragon Destroyer, and Bolano reveres the hoe as a legitimate dragon hunter, although Blossom is embarrassed to have used it. Balarosa, on the other hand, is going to hunt magical beasts, so the girls comment on the leader's discipline and training every day. On the trail, Balarosa drops her tough facade and confesses to herself that she also wanted that same title, which is so prestigious that it can turn a commoner into a noble, the dream of every adventurer. If she had obtained the title, she could have restored her family's greatness and returned to the capital, like when her father was a knight. Suddenly, a strange creature approaches and asks the woman for help finding someone he's looking for nearby. Balarosa finds it odd that the being is walking so unequipped in a forest full of monsters, but she still asks if the demon is talking about Fleo or his wife. When he responds that he's a friend of Fleo's wife, the warrior draws her sword and questions if the monster belongs to the army of the demon lord, because he has unfinished business with someone who left the army. Despite the danger, the demon admits to being part of the diabolical forces but promises that he only came to check on his friend, nothing more. So Balarosa sheaths her sword and lets the matter drop there, but the demon introduces himself as Gozel and wants to send a message to Fenris inviting her for tea in the name of old times. As he departs, Balarosa finds his name very strange until Fleo and Riz arrive to see if the girl had been hurt. She explains that someone named Gozel identified himself as an enemy, but still sought Riz, so Fenris jests about him having better fake names he used instead. Balarosa asks what this story is about, so Fleo explains that when he went after his friend in the forest, his menu showed Balarosa's status as talking to someone with the title of Demon Lord. The knight finds it hard to believe that she was really facing the Lord of Darkness, thinking she's going to die for pointing her sword at him, and Riz reaffirms that it was him in person, and his real name is actually Gaul. The next day, Gaul keeps his word and knocks on Riz's door after so long without seeing each other, and Fleo insists on inviting the demon to his house, still calling him Gozel. The demon finds it strange that the boy shows no sign of fear in front of him, while Balarosa, on the other hand, doesn't know how to react when faced with the man again. During the tea, Gozel recalls that Fleo dealt with one of his subordinates a few days ago, while Balarosa wonders why she needs to side with the demon. Riz asks if he came for payback, prompting Fleo to remind his wife about good manners with the visitor. Then Gozel gets straight to the point and invites the boy to join the army since the king of Clyrode is openly an enemy of Fleo and he is exiled in this forest. Fleo explains that he shouldn't serve a human just because he is one, and moreover, he is from another world and doesn't even know the reason for the war. That said, Gozel explains that the conflict between humans and demons has been going on for 500 years, since the emergence of the first demon lord, who is a stranger from another world who wanted to rule this one. As humans oppressed this outsider, it was the demons who first accepted his presence. From there, a conflict began between the supporters of this foreigner, who were divided between humans and demons. And as the years went by, the conflict escalated until it became a widespread war. Fleo asks if the Lord intends to stop the war, so he explains that mentalities have changed a lot over 12 generations, and he himself does not intend to conquer the world, but as the demon lord, he cannot simply ignore a potential threat by aligning with enemies, so Gozel emanates a powerful energy from his body. On the other hand, the boy thinks the devil is overestimating him and that, as he has already said, he does not wish to take sides in this war. That said, Gozel finds the human's stubbornness amusing, understanding why he is exiled in the middle of nowhere. However, he assures that he will not give up recruiting Fleo as an ally, so he promises to come back. As he leaves, Gozel finds Balarosa an interesting woman for having sat next to the Lord of Darkness all this time without feeling fear. However, the girl was actually paralyzed with terror. The next day, the warrior wakes up after a traumatic day and ends up arriving in the kitchen without realizing that her worst nightmare was before her. Called in person once again. On this day, he arrived early to mooch all Fenris's food, but the lupine wants him to leave as soon as he finishes eating because it's rude to show up unannounced, and her husband won't change his mind about yesterday's proposal. Finding her clothes inappropriate, Balarosa slips away, while Gozel finds her even more charming. Later, she's properly dressed and cautiously heads out to avoid encountering the devil again, but he keeps sticking to her, this time forcing her to run off to her sword training. A day later, once again, Gozel catches the girl in her pajamas, so her excuse for running off was that she had to do laundry by the river. The next day, she remembers she needed to gather firewood inside the house upon realizing the arrival of the Lord of Darkness in the garden. Meanwhile, human spies discover the presence of a demon in the house of that exiled adventurer, and the king is outraged by the fact that Fleo has refused 3 summons and now sides with the enemy, so he orders his troops to deal with it. However, the first princess of Clyrode points out that there is no evidence of the adventurer's alliance with the demon lord, therefore an attack could actually push him into the enemy's trenches. Therefore, your majesty should not only send emissaries for a formal summons, but also listen to what he has to say to create an approach between both sides. However, the king tells the girl to stay silent because, according to him, a nation is not governed with such naive ideals. By the way, the great hero emerges after a long time hidden in the southern fortress and asks the king for soldiers to subdue the demon's ally. The next morning in the demon lord's castle, Eulimenes warns his master that it is dangerous to wander around in those lands, but Gull believes that, unlike the king, that human is capable of talking, so it is possible to establish a reconciliation with him. The servant reminds that their troops are awaiting orders, but the demon leader still does not know when he will attack, so he leaves without saying anything else. With this, Eulimenes analyzes that as the demon lord continues to visit this human in this way, more and more demons criticize this attitude, so none of this is worth it. On this day, Fleo was wanting to sell defense equipment using dragon scales, so he created a test object, but it needs to be improved for sales to sustain their lives in the forest. By the way, Fenris questions if this is really what the boy wants because working for the great hero would give Fleo all the money he needs and more. For this reason, Riz thinks that her husband is only there because of her. However, Fleo doesn't think he's as kind as she thinks, but that understanding he has great powers, maybe it's best to avoid any kind of conflict. Anyway, it's because of thinking like this that Riz sees so much goodness in the human's heart. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door, making the couple think it's Gozel again, but Bylary appears to warn that, just like in Elite Squad 2, the enemy is now another. That said, at Fleo's door was an entire army of Clyrode and their great hero, demanding the subordination of the exiled adventurer against the forces of the demon lord. Otherwise, Fleo will be considered an enemy collaborator and will meet his end by the blade of the sword. In giving this speech, the hero thinks that the adventurer is speechless because of his stunning charisma, and with that, he is sure that he will be the savior of the homeland and will leave his name in the kingdom's history, and all he has to do is throw this crazy wizard at the demons and wait for victory to come. On the other hand, Fleo apologizes for the many people who came to honor the event, but he still refuses both proposals. The great hero declares Fleo a traitor to the homeland, while the girls revolt against the officer's attitude. For this reason, he announces that he will arrest all the warrior women who cooperated with the enemy unless they convince the adventurer to ally with Clyrode. In this case, Fleo sees no other choice because he doesn't want to cause problems for his friends, so he decides to move to another place, thus maintaining his neutrality in the conflict. Fenris, as well as Balirosa and her group, would love to accompany the master on this journey. After all, the humans grew up thinking that demons are naturally evil, but they changed their minds by living with Rise all this time, which made them all realize that this irrational conflict makes no sense. Furthermore, Balirosa refuses to serve a false hero who threatens an innocent, shaming her father's legacy, who was indeed an honorable knight. That said, Blossom, Bylary, and Belano agree, and reaffirm a desire to join the rest of the group, and even in the face of the demands and threats of the great hero, Fleo uses his teleportation magic to start his life away from there, taking his entire house and even the garden with him, leaving all the soldiers amazed by such power. The great hero feels envious for not being able to use a spell of that level, while one of his soldiers points to the demon who is in contact with Fleo because he has just appeared. There was Cole, finding out at that moment that Fleo had left with everything and everyone. The demon lord is irritated by the humans ruining his plans, so he exudes tremendous power from his body and announces to his entire army that the troops must gather to invade the magical kingdom of Clyrode, thus showing the real power of the demons. At the demon base, Eulimenes celebrates the master's decision, who begins to awaken the diabolical forces and cover the human kingdom with dark clouds. Without thinking twice, the great hero flees ahead of everyone like a coward, leaving his men behind once again. Meanwhile, Fleo relocates his entire structure to a new place for everyone to live, with the plantation perfectly alive just the way it was. The group's new life is now near Hawtown, west of the capital, the city where Fleo had passed to sell his equipment made of dragon scale. Balirosa breathes a sigh of relief, and Blossom teases her friend because the demon lord liked her. In the midst of this, Fleo apologizes to Riz if he caused any trouble, but the lupine knows it's not the boy's fault. Besides, she swore to stand by him wherever he goes, and she doesn't intend to break that promise as his wife. Therefore, Fenris promises to make a special dinner to celebrate the new life with this change, always accompanied by the 4 knights who decided to share their lives with Fleo and his wife. However, as Fleo sought his peace, the demons attacked human lands, plundering everything in their path and reaching the northern fortress, where the defense lines were crumbling before the unmatched force of the demons. In face of this, the king questions what the great hero is doing at a time like this, and a soldier informs that he is secluded in the southern fortress. The king immediately summons the hero, while the advisors propose preparing the purification spell with all the country's mages, even considering the consequences it will bring, because if the northern fortress falls, it will be the end of Clyrode. Meanwhile, the demon lord receives news from a subordinate named Greenies that the moment is approaching, so the lord plans to retreat with Eulimenes. She thought this would be the time to intensify the offensive, but the lord knows that the humans will cast a purification spell. With the mages gathered, Clyrode seeks to conjure this magic to rid the kingdom of the demonic threat, creating a magical circle in the sky that covers the entire extent of its territory, beginning the purification. Away from the war, Fleo rides home and is greeted by Reese with a loving embrace. Then she asks if he wants to have lunch now or if he prefers to start with dessert in the room with her. Awkwardly, Fleo chooses lunch, so the lupine rushes to prepare. During tea, she asks her husband how it went in the city, since he was looking for a place to do business. Fleo says there are many shops in Hawtown, so he spent that time observing all of them to get an idea of the prices of the products he wants to sell. Blossom comments that she also thought about selling vegetables from the garden to repay for the lodging, but the homeowner doesn't want anyone to worry about any of that. Bilary would love to breed horses to rent for carriages because she worked in the castle stable and has experience in that field. Regarding this, the adventurer allows her to use the house funds for this business, while Balarosa and Bolano feel useless for not knowing how to do anything. Then Reese says she sees no problem in supporting the girls as the wife of the pack leader. As the girls found the term pack strange to refer to themselves, Fleo changes the subject and responds that the two can focus on magic and sword training if everyone shares the household chores. Back in the kingdom, the council mage warns that the purification magic made the demon lord's army retreat, but this magic only lasts about 3 months, thus being a temporary protection. Looking at the mages who participated in the conjuration, the Princess of Clyrode sees that they all fell ill after using all the mana, and with luck, they will recover by the time the purification expires. The king, as a mage of the kingdom, also joined the conjuration and is therefore incapacitated, so his daughter will assume his duties until he recovers. In the first place, she removes the great hero from his position, surprising everyone. After all, the hero is hidden in a fortress at the most dangerous moment for the kingdom, therefore, he is not worthy of this position. The advisor suggests summoning a new great hero, but the mages are incapacitated and cannot cast this spell. Thus, the princess sent for the prophetess. A short time south of Clyrode, the great hero receives the news that he has been dismissed, and he finds it an unacceptable affront since he was handpicked by the king. Be that as it may, the guard throws the man's belongings out and expels him from the fortress. Returning to Hawtown, Fleo comments at bedtime that Riz is really motivated to do things since they arrived there. Sleepily, Riz emphasizes that she would do anything for her husband, and therefore Fleo thanks her for what she has been doing because it must not be easy to adjust to human habits and still be so kind and helpful. However, when he finishes speaking, the boy sees that his wife had already fallen asleep, so he smiles and reflects that when he was brought to this world alone, he was very insecure, but he quickly found work and a home. But above all, he knows that he wouldn't be at ease without the company of his wife and friends. The next day, the girls offer the couple a day off to enjoy together, while the rest take care of the household responsibilities. Fleo doesn't seem to like the idea for some reason, but his wife's excitement is such that she grabs her husband to get them out soon. Having done that, they stroll together through the countryside and the city of Hawtown, enjoying a rare moment when the two can be alone. After having lunch at a great restaurant, Fleo tries to show concern about something, but Reeves grabs the boy's arm again and takes him to another place because she doesn't want to miss this opportunity. At the city market, Riz shows interest in some things, so Fleo decides to give her a present as a token of appreciation for everything she has done for him. The lupine is delighted to receive her first gift in life, so she carefully examines every product in the market to make this unique moment worthwhile. Upon arriving at a jewelry store, the attendant notes that Reese is looking at natural stone brooches, which would look beautiful in the girl's hair. Fleo picks one of the brooches and notices that it suits his wife very well, so the lupine makes her decision. Upon returning home, she can't take her eyes off the gift she received, and the other girls are happy that the girl took a whole day for herself and enjoyed it until late at night. But at the same time, they feel a fierce envy. At bedtime, Reese lies on Fleo's chest, making the boy blush with embarrassment. The lupine was talking in her sleep about Fangs being her life, so the boy adjusts her in bed, imagining that she must have been tired from the hectic day in the city, But the girl doesn't let go of the boy at all. As dawn broke, the great hero had knocked out the fortress guards to steal the gold, enraged at being abandoned by the princess. Despite the man's decline, Sui assured she would continue to serve him if he reclaimed his title, while the knight vowed not to live as a commoner in this world. Thus, he sought some secret treasure capable of defeating the demon lord and being praised for the rest of his life, as a great hero should be, not just an intruder who mastered complex spells without the title. Envious, the knight desired more power, and at that moment, a strange voice offered it to him if he freed her. The hero questioned what was happening, so the voice guided the man through a secret passage in the treasure room. Inside, there was a sword that supposedly granted any wish when wielded. Suya was frightened and wanted to know who her master was talking to, surprised that the girl couldn't hear that voice. Meanwhile, the voice kept goading the warrior to draw the sword until he wielded the weapon and caused a brief hurricane, revealing Haya, a djinn who controlled the light and darkness of origin. The djinn's voice echoed in the hero's mind while Suya trembled behind him. Soon, Haya granted the human 3 wishes, anything he desired. So the prince smiled and made his first wish. Meanwhile, Ursula the prophetess arrived at the kingdom, imagining the situation must be serious for the largest magical realm to seek her help. The princess explained that Clyrode was protected by a purification spell lasting 3 months, so something needed to be done to ensure the kingdom wasn't crushed afterward. At that moment, a magical collar was placed on everyone in the room, including the princess and the prophetess. So upon discovering what it could be, the princess ordered the guards to capture the intruders from the treasure room. Ursula warned that this was the decapitation collar used to behead sacrifices offered to a certain djinn in exchange for fulfilling a wish. A man asked how this was possible, so the princess recounted that in a distant past, the king of Clyrode wished for the death of a demon, and in return, half of the living beings on the continent were demanded. For this reason, at the cost of many lives, the kingdom's wizards united to seal the djinn. However, it seems someone had freed her, so they had little time before being beheaded. Therefore, the princess asked the prophetess what she could do to overcome this crisis. So Ursula laid a hand of cards on the table and saw that the noblewoman needed to find the true great hero, for he had already been summoned to this realm and was in the west. As Fleo's fame spread throughout Clyrode, everyone speculated it might be the exiled adventurer, so they requested the kingdom's forces to search the lands in that region. However, the princess didn't want to risk dividing the forces protecting the northern entrance, so she decided to personally seek the hero. Meanwhile, Fleo showed his product to a blacksmith who was impressed with the craftsmanship. The blacksmith recalled that recently an adventurer sold kilograms of meat to the butcher, so he asked if it was also Fleo, and the adventurer replied that all the mentioned materials were obtained through a secret source. That said, the blacksmith agreed to buy the dragon scale equipment provided Fleo brought other products sold by this secret contact. The adventurer accepted the proposal and asked if anyone there was interested in buying leather products from magical beasts, and the blacksmith replied that he preferred to buy everything, but since that's the case, he decided to introduce the boy to the buyers. Outside, Balirosa observed that the boy had many talents because besides building a dragon scale shield, he ensured the sales route himself. Teasingly, Riz remarked that he used to be a merchant, so Balirosa confessed to feeling envious of the lupine for the husband she had. Without beating around the bush, Riz grabbed the knight by the neck, but she explained she just wanted someone like Fleo. Riz reminded Balirosa that she already had Gozel to make her happy, and the knight was traumatized to discover that the devil desired her. Leaving the shop, Fleo thanked Balirosa for the referral and mentioned he sold the product for more than he imagined, and the girl was happy to help as she knew the region well. Returning home, Riz believed Fleo enjoyed negotiating his products, and Fleo admitted he enjoyed this work as he was a merchant in his original world. The lupine was glad to see her husband excited about these things, but at the same time, she expressed concern about spending less and less time with him. For this reason, she would love to take a day to hunt or stroll with the boy, and he agreed to that. Suddenly, an alert of djinn presence appeared for Fleo, so Haya appeared in front of him after the great hero had wished to eliminate the criminal outsider who had humiliated him in front of his troops. At that moment, Fleo's automatic defense was activated, while Riz positioned herself in front of her husband to be hit instead of him by the djinn's attack. The blow opened a huge wound in the lupine's chest and broke the brooch she had received as a gift, while Haida mocked as if she had missed throwing a paper ball into the trash can. Balirosa screamed that the djinn would pay for what she did, while the entity caused several explosions in the sky that were protected by Fleo's magical defense. Realizing that the adventurer could defend himself from this type of onslaught, the demon decided to change tactics. At the same time, Fleo's healing magic was nullified because the severity of the wound was greater than the level of his spell. Desperate, the boy didn't know what to do to save his wife, while Haya conjured the magic of the origin light, causing a massive energy blast on her target and company. Despite this, Fleo emerged unharmed and was informed by the system that he had acquired the magic of light and darkness of the origin. With his dead wife in his arms, the exile gently placed her on the ground and promised to make the demon pay. Suddenly, memories flowed through the protagonist's mind, recalling moments of affection and loyalty between the two. Since arriving in this new world, Fleo had been discarded and treated like dirt by the kingdom, thrown into the middle of a forest without knowing anyone. Until one day Riz appeared, and since then she never left the boy's side. Fleo had accepted the temporary term of marry to avoid a master-servant relationship, but the lupine accepted it with great joy, even though it was Fleo himself who killed her brother. Because of this, the boy feels the need to protect the girl above all else, as if it were his mission in this unknown world. So when Fleo stands in front of Jin, a circle appears in his head announcing that he's rewinding the target individual's time. As Fleo approaches, Haya wonders how a mere human could have the ability to turn back time, and while she continues with her arrogant stance, the boy punches her in the face and throws the entity away, showing that things were serious. The Jin bleeds and questions if the human thinks he's capable of defeating she who controls all the magic in the world, but Fleo is clueless, so he steps on the woman's chest and tells her to shut up. Haya retaliates with dark origin magic, however, Fleo nullifies a power of that magnitude as if it were nothing. From there, Haya tries to figure out who this creature facing her is at the moment, and upon checking Fleo's attributes, she sees an infinity symbol for each adventurer's status. Soon, Fleo continues to mercilessly massacre his enemy, and with the return of time, Riz wakes up. The lupine is spotted by Balarosa, who sees that her husband's magic brought her back, until she looks ahead and sees the boy beating the entity so powerful that it broke free from the seal. Despite the severity of the damage, Fleo doesn't lessen the intensity of his blows, and Riz is swooning at seeing the man beating someone up for her, especially a Jin. At this moment, Riz remembers when the boy said he wouldn't kill the lupine when they met because he doesn't even like to fight, and on top of that, Fenris surrendered. In the midst of this, Haya takes another powerful punch, and this time falls almost without energy to get up. Fleo gives her a hand and extends her by the neck as high as he could, then the Jin begins to beg for her life. The human makes it clear that he won't spare the life of anyone who hurt Riz. However, it's the girl herself who arrives and pleads with her husband not to kill the entity. She mentions the recent episode she remembered about Fleo sparing her because she surrendered. Now that she has witnessed this episode of violence from her husband, Fenris is very afraid of seeing him become something he's not through this hatred, so she wants him to stop. Coming to his senses, Fleo notices that Riz is back after his magic worked, so he embraces his beloved once again. Meanwhile, the princess sets out in search of the great hero through the forest, and the present mages are still weak after the conjuration of the gigantic magic that brought momentary peace to the kingdom. For this reason, the princess demands that the battalion's priority be to arrest the wizards, when suddenly the decapitation necklace is destroyed from each of their necks. Faced with this, the princess wonders if the Jin failed to fulfill her wish. As for the false great hero, he hides in the treasure room, believing that the Jin only used him to escape. However, a dark voice emerges again, mocking the fact that the Jin failed, and shortly thereafter, the shadows that emerge from the seal's location capture Suya to serve as a sacrifice. In a matter of seconds, the entity takes over the woman's body and celebrates her new phase in flesh and blood after hundreds of years. Despite liking the body, she didn't want to keep those clothes, so she conjures something more appropriate for her. The hero still thinks it's Suya, while the voice that possessed the woman thanks him for freeing that bothersome Jin, which allowed her to come out. So she introduces herself as Damalinus, the great midnight mage, and assures the man that she will give him the power he desires in place of that Jin. Having said that, she transforms the human into a bizarre creature and even mocks the fact that this current form is more beautiful than the previous one. Then she tames the beast and promises to take revenge on those who sealed her, until she sees a teleportation circle on the ground and thinks that the royalty is trying to escape her wrath, but she assures that the successors and descendants of the nobility will die. Back to Fleo, he heals Haya after the thorough beating, and she wakes up desperate, asking for forgiveness for what she did, and the boy makes it clear that he spared her because Riz ended up okay in the end. Balarosa asks what will be done with the Jin, because whether they like it or not, she still represents a threat if left free. Therefore, Fleo suggests sealing her again in the treasure room. The entity questions how the human knew she was there, so he tells her that for some reason he acquired new abilities, so he took a look into her mind to see everything that happened. Faced with this, Haya can't believe that a young man like this is capable of using magic that only she could, while he observes that returning the Jin to the castle could cost dearly in the future, as just happened. As nobody finds a solution to this chaos, Riz intervenes and asks her to become Fleo's servant. The guy was about to complain as usual, but the lupine cuts in with a hold-on gesture and understands that her husband doesn't want a servant. He just doesn't feel safe keeping this creature away, so the solution would be to keep her close. Furthermore, having such a powerful djinn in the pack will boost the group's resume. In turn, the adventurer questions if that's really what she wants, so the girl freaks out slightly, almost tearing her hair out, and she stands up and shouts that all of this is very frustrating, but it was her lack of strength that allowed the djinn to subdue her. Confused, Fleo pretends to understand and promises to stop feeling angry at Haya someday. Then he reaches out to her and asks her to promise never to take anyone's life again. Upon hearing this, Haya reflects that humans would do anything to sacrifice others and fulfill their desires, but this boy is shown to be completely different. Therefore, she stands up and promises that her body and all the powers she possesses now belong to him. Fleo apologizes for his earlier outburst, but the entity assures him that no apology is necessary, especially since the woman gets a little excited just remembering that mean look the boy gave her when he punched her. Noticing this, Reese speaks up and tells the djinn to stop right there. Moving on from that topic, Fleo looks around and considers using time manipulation magic to fix the mess he made in this city earlier, but the djinn asks him never to use that spell again because this ability only controls time within the target area, and the imbalance that occurs between those inside and outside that range can lead to unforeseen accidents. However, if she were to use it, she could restrict the target's range to just one individual. In response, Fleo questions why he can use it if that's the case, so Haya explains that the boy's attributes are simply infinite, giving him the ability to use a type of magic called Epiphany, which only those who have achieved the title of Transcendent can use. This gift allows you to acquire any ability used on you aside from the associated magics. Regardless, she asks him one last time not to use time manipulation because it's beyond his control, so the boy agrees and decides to use repair magic to rebuild the mess he caused around him. As the group arrives home, the girls who stayed behind see that enigmatic being in front of them, introducing herself as a djinn capable of commanding the light and darkness of origin, and who is now a servant of the supreme being Fleo. With that said, the girls in the group can't believe what they're seeing, especially after the demon lord himself had lunch at their house. Fleo argues that the woman had nowhere else to go, and Blossom remarks that the guy is talking as if he adopted a stray kitten. Upon seeing Balarosa's arrival, Bilary jumps on her and asks if they really need to live with such a terrifying creature. Balarosa replies that everything will be fine as long as Fleo is there, and then she invites Haya to look at her new room. As night falls, Fleo reflects on what he was capable of doing earlier with his own fists until Balarosa appears, asking if everything is okay with him. He says yes and apologizes for the commotion he caused in the afternoon, but he really has no idea where he could have left that djinn. Anyway, the woman comments that she thought Reese was also an enemy, but she turned out to be the opposite in the end. The great hero, on the other hand, was not an ally. For this reason, Balarosa isn't sure why she trains every day to get stronger if she doesn't even know who she'll be wielding her sword against. Ironically, she would never have worried about this if she hadn't met Fleo and Reese, and that's why she feels grateful to them because they made her realize that not everything that seems right actually is. Shortly after, the adventurer goes up to his room, where Reese is sitting on the bed with a strange expression. The boy asks what's going on, so his wife grabs him by the arm and climbs on top of him. She then asks if he's going back to the world he came from because that's what Haya said he would do, since Fleo is capable of learning the abilities he suffers and those related to her. Therefore, having the power of a djinn, perhaps the boy can now return to where he came from, and this fear makes Fenris beg him to take her along wherever he goes. After hearing this, the boy hugs the girl tightly and says he's not going back to his home planet because where he came from would be very difficult for a half-human like her to live, and he has no intention of leaving Riz behind. With that said, he asks if Fenris wants to become his real wife, since the feeling he had today that he could lose the girl was terrifying and dreadful for him, and the intensity of that feeling made him lose control. Flea remembers that they were supposed to be just a fake couple, but the truth is he can't imagine his life without Riz anymore. On the other hand, Fenris responds that she always took the title of wife very seriously, and that her whole life she learned about fighting and leading a pack, but upon meeting Fleo, she learned to feel emotions she never imagined existed. Then the two fall silent and kiss, and the lupine remembers that her husband said he had changed his appearance to escape the castle, but now there's no need for that anymore. However, he replies that this identity in this world as Fleo is who he is now, so he prefers his old name and appearance to be forgotten. At that moment, Haya appears at the door like a ghost. Riza asks since when she's been standing there, and the djinn replies that since the two sat on the bed because it's her duty to witness the paths the Supreme Being will tread. Flea remarks how ugly it is to invade others' privacy, but Haya sees nothing shameful in reproductive intercourse. Then Riz also loses it, while the other girls hear the argument erupting in their room. Meanwhile, the Princess of Clyrode searches every corner where Fleo might be, asking about an adventurer capable of defeating many magical beasts at once, but she's not having any luck. Flea was enjoying his life in the countryside with his companions, and now with a new addition to the group, a djinn who not only controls the light and dark of origin, but also can spice up lunch sauce, helping Riz in the kitchen. She could have used magic to do everything, but the lupine wouldn't allow it because according to her, it's her job to cook for her husband. So if she wants to help, Haya could take care of the house cleaning, something she can also handle in seconds. Hearing this, the other girls are afraid of being kicked out because they help clean the house as a reward for living there, which seems like it won't be necessary anymore. As a consequence, Blossom works tirelessly in the garden, making her stay worthwhile. Sive also seems to fear eviction and turns into a gigantic beast to dig the earth as quickly as possible. Bilary was planning to set up the carriage business to contribute to expenses, but so far all she's managed to do is take care of the horses. However, the animals seem to recognize that the girl values them, treating the owner with great affection. At the same time, Milena remembers her father and brother, how she became a mage of the castle like the two of them. Now she has Fleo to help her become more powerful, even if it's gradually and even if she feels like a failure most of the time. In the end, all she wants is to learn more spells and honor her family's name. Meanwhile, a magical horse invades Blossom's garden and destroys the crops until it charges at the mage, who has just come down to see what's happening. She manages to cast a spell that stops the beast. Balirosa approaches and says that this animal seemed peaceful, so she didn't have the heart to kill it and ended up bringing it home. But now that it has shown aggression, the knight draws her sword. However, Bilary questions if the horse started acting aggressively suddenly, and when Balirosa confirms, the archer asks Sive to turn back into a horned rabbit. Then she throws a rope with a shovel on the end into the horse's mouth. The animal bites the shovel, and the girl uses the rope to tame the beast by riding on its back. The girls praise the talent of their friend, the animal tamer, who asks Balirosa if she can use the large open land around the property. Balirosa explains that everything around Fleo's land belongs to the same owner, and they could only use it if they bought it from the guide, just like the adventurer did. Upon hearing this, Bilary has an idea. In the middle of the city, Riz is happy to have some time alone with her husband, even though Fleo only went to sell his equipment, and it's not a date per se. Anyway, there she can be affectionate with the boy more comfortably since there's always someone at home to disturb the couple's intimacy. Back at the local shops, a merchant praises a product made by the boy from salamander skin. In his opinion, it's a lightweight garment which could be advantageous for women, and if that's the case, it would be interesting to add some color. So he shows some magical stones to do that, and Fleo's attention is caught by the light stone, a very rare item that costs a fortune, according to the merchant. Watching her husband from outside, Riz goes crazy when he puts on that serious hardworking guy face. Suddenly, she witnesses darkness covering the entire sky. Nearby, the princess and her guards continue their search, still without luck, until they also see the sky closing and creating a huge magical circle that pours out lightning from within. Then Damelina steps out of the circle with her new magical creature, which once was the great hero of Clyrode. The sorceress spots the princess and goes after her, so the soldiers surround the noblewoman to protect her. As Damelina clears the guards from her path, Haya arrives in the city after sensing waves of evil and meets Riz and Fleo. She informs them that the giant monster is actually a human and assumed that form due to the witch's magic guiding him, named Damelina's the Damascus Great Midnight Mage. A long time ago, this sorceress ruled as the most powerful in the magic kingdom of Clyrode, but tainted her hands with dark magic. So she was defeated by the great hero at the time, but even though her body died, her mental state remained sealed inside the pedestal holding the sword where Haya was sealed. Therefore, at the same time the djinn was freed, so was the mage. Faced with this, she requests permission from the Supreme Being to rid the city of this hag threatening it. Fleo grants permission, provided the djinn prioritizes the lives of the city's inhabitants, speaking of which the boy calls Riz to help as many people as she can. Back to the princess, only one soldier survives in front of her, trembling in fear before such powerful beings, and the king's daughter recognizes that Damelina's the Great Midnight Mage stands before her. The sorceress loves to contemplate the princess's expression of terror, but at the same time, she needs to take her life at this moment. With that said, she uses the beast to step on the girl, but Haya appears to prevent the worst. The mage also recognizes the djinn and doesn't seem to have the same confidence in victory as she did before. Haya states that she will eliminate anyone who disturbs the life of the supreme being she serves, so Damelina mocks the fact that the entity is talking too much for someone who couldn't even grant a wish recently. Then she rises to the sky to flaunt her power and attack her enemy, but Haya absorbs the magic with just one arm, further diminishing the opponent's confidence. Haya makes it clear that absolutely no magic affects her, so inhabitants of this world like the sorceress are nothing to her. When magic fails, Damelina tries brute force with the monster to launch a joint attack with a spell, but the djinn repels any attempt by the mage to her opponent. Despite the series of failures, Demolinas tries to maintain her composure and claims that she cannot be defeated. To prove she's telling the truth, she opens a rift in the abyss of darkness and triggers a bodily alteration in her beast, elevating her to stratospheric levels, putting the entire city at risk. However, the magical circle sustaining this spell is broken, reshaping the monster. At that moment, Fleo arrives with Fenris, informing that he spotted the giant from afar and used Dispel magic to contain it. Haya kneels and begs for forgiveness for involving the Supreme Being in the conflict and accepts any punishment, yet the boy is truly frightened by this entity's stance. Thus, she requests at least end this situation. Facing a completely surrendered and helpless Demolinas, the Jinn absorbs the mage and returns both her and the beast to their original forms, the Great Hero and Suya. Transforming the sorceress into a small pill, Haya swallows her, condemning Demolinas to spend time within the Jinn's mental state. There, Haya will discipline the mage to make her useful to the Supreme Being Fleo. As for the Great Hero, since he's been causing so many problems, Fleo lets the castle guards take care of him when they can. At that moment, the king's daughter arrives and introduces herself as Elizabeth Clyrode, first princess of the magical kingdom of Clyrode. She thanks the adventurer for all he's done for the kingdom, apologizing for the poor treatment received by the king and the Great Hero. Bowing before the adventurer, she reveals that the hero has been dismissed from his duty due to all the havoc he caused to the kingdom, which is why Elizabeth sought Fleo to make him the true savior of the nation, now that the people have lost hope amidst such terror. However, Fleo regrets but declines the invitation because he knows that someone who accepts such a grand commitment must be willing to exercise their power for the good of humanity without hesitation, and he's not capable of that. Above all, the life he has now is all he wants, being with his wife and nothing more. Sometime later, the couple is welcomed back home by the other girls who ask to expand the property around the estate. Bilary, for instance, would like to breed magical beast horses, needing more land for that. Similarly, Blossom also wants to increase the territory to cultivate more varieties of vegetables. With these two ventures in motion, they could sell the harvest using the wagons manufactured within the property. Rice acknowledges that it would be possible to create magical horses if Bilary were as powerful as Fleo, but certainly those beasts cannot be subdued by mere humans. The archer is sure she could keep the creatures tamed if they had space to roam. Thus, Fleo promises to talk to the lord of the domain about it, but the girls emphasize that they would like to buy the land themselves. So Fleo shows them how much a neighboring plot would cost, considering what he paid for this one, and the girls are horrified by the deal's value. The adventurer explains that these lands appreciated greatly because demons don't appear in this area. Nonetheless, he agrees to buy the additional land provided they take care of everything and give him back 30% of the profit earned from their work. Without a second thought, the girls accept the proposal and begin tilling the new property, and Reese finds it amusing that they prefer this to combat training. Soon, Fleo suggests that Blossom cultivate vegetables that are hard to find in the vicinity using magic to control the temperature and other necessities. Haya offers to perform this service, but Blossom is convinced that magic doesn't solve everything and would like to try cultivating these vegetables herself. However, Bolano appears and says she would love to see the Jinn using magic to stimulate this cultivation, and Blossom asks why she's dressed that way. The little sorceress explains that she decided to go to the magic school in Hato, and at this moment she's going for training, including as a teacher. Faced with the news, everyone is surprised and happy at the same time, and Bolano explains that the variety of spells Fleo taught her provided this opportunity. She reveals that an important thing she discovered is that spells learned usually for war can also be very useful for everyday life. Given the novelty, Fleo recommends that only part of the plantation be created with magic, and with that, Blossom would see if that part would be as productive as the natural part. Thus, the warrior accepts the conditions, provided that the mages take this work very seriously and carefully. At some point in the late afternoon, Fleo is amazed by the work everyone has been doing in the field, and Reese is happy to see everyone working with such enthusiasm. Speaking of which, her husband confesses that he would love to open his own shop one day, and the Lupine supports this idea too because certainly the boy would have great products to sell. She would call all her friends to visit the store even if they are all demons, as long as they at least assume human form to enter. That said, she adds that she would do anything for her husband, and since she's on the subject, Fleo shows her a ring he made from a beautiful stone he found, and this will be their wedding ring, just like the one he's wearing. With that, Reese can't contain her happiness and hugs her beloved with all her affection. On the other side of the coin, the former Great Hero of Clyrode questions why he has to go through this while rotting in jail, with Suya by his side grumbling that they'll be executed if they don't get out of there. Well aware of this, the man becomes desperate and pleads to be taken out of there. In a strange place, Balirosa wears a black wedding dress, confused about where she is until Euliminas appears, congratulating her on the occasion. Then the Demon King himself appears, praising the beauty of his bride. Because of this marriage, Eulymenes declares that the demonic army will dedicate all its strength to dominate the world to offer it as a wedding gift to the couple. Gozel offers the entire planet as a tribute to the beauty of his newest wife, but she envisions this world in flames and refuses the possibility. However, Gozel is determined to marry this woman. In fact, he makes it clear that he loves her before kissing his beloved. At that moment, she wakes up from the nightmare screaming, wondering why on earth she would dream of such a malicious creature, especially in such a situation. When morning comes during coffee preparation, Riz asks the knight if everything is okay. Balyrosa mentions that she has been having many nightmares lately, so the lupine respond that this may be an indication of her being in love because for her race, dreams are images of desire. Immediately, the other girls imagine that it is the demon king with whom their friend has been dreaming. After all, according to them, the demon always came to see the girl, pretending he was dealing with matters with Fleo. Because whenever Balyrosa wasn't around, the Lord of Darkness found a way to leave early. The girl doesn't know how to react to this and shouts that this whole story must be resentment because she raised her sword against him, so he must be waiting for the right moment to kill her. However, none of the friends fall for this, and Blossom emphasizes that Balyrosa would even be able to forge bonds between the two races, just like Fleo and Riz did. Speaking of which, the girls have never heard the story of when the couple fell in love, so they want to hear it from Fenris. The lupine never thought much about it and doesn't know exactly how to tell this story, but if she had to define her husband, she would certainly say how willing he always is to help others. Unlike the Lupines, who always solve everything with claws and teeth, Fleo is extremely generous and seems to always have his guard down. At first, she thought she needed to change his ways as a way of not being vulnerable, but in the end, she came to believe that a couple with a soft heart wasn't so bad after all. Speaking of the boy, he receives an alert about a magical barrier he placed around the city to keep enemies at bay, and something has been detected in it. So he needs to hurry to identify the threat. Somewhere more isolated in the kingdom, the girl visually notices the traits of the protective shield. The next day, Elizabeth learns that most of the gold coins Fleo recently donated were road gold coins issued by the castle. The princess remembers when the adventurer refused to take sides in the war, but at least contributed a bag of money to help rebuild the city. Road gold coins are not distributed to the general populace, so it is necessary to know how this type of money ends up in that man's hands. For this reason, the counselor remembers handing out this type of coin for the last time to a young man named Banaza, who was mistakenly summoned to another world and then banished. For this reason, he suspects that Banaza is actually Fleo. Faced with this, the princess is incredulous and asserts that the kingdom should start by apologizing to the adventurer. Suddenly, a soldier arrives alerting that the former great hero and his servant escaped from the dungeon and fled the castle. Elizabeth orders everyone to seek help from vigilantes and adventurers to find the fugitive, while she laments that Fleo didn't take on the title of hero himself. But she knows it doesn't make sense to cry over spilled milk because she herself supported that golden-haired man for the role of the great hero. Around the castle, Clyrode's soldiers are in search of the man who escaped from his cell, and Suyet is exhausted from dodging all these men since they stepped out of the cell. The hero blames that damned Jin for everything she did, but Suyet makes a point of reminding him that they were stealing things from the castle, especially a magic bag that he took. According to the man, it wasn't theft, but rather a payment he chose instead of the money the kingdom owed him because Clyrode promised if he played his part as the great hero, he would be entitled to enough gold to live very well for the rest of his life. So the kingdom should be thankful since he gave up a much larger payment in exchange for a measly bag. In fact, Suya points out that this was the only thing the boy could carry with him, but since they were talking about the bag, the young man finally takes a look inside to see what's there. Soon he finds a chest and puts it outside, imagining that there might be some treasure in it that he could sell to finance his escape. However, all that was inside the chest was a shovel. Suddenly, the soldiers hear voices nearby, but when they go to grab the fugitive, there's nothing behind those bushes. It turns out that the hero had the idea to use the shovel to dig a hole in front of the presence of the enemies, and the shovel was able to dig a huge hole in the ground in a few seconds, allowing them to hide. The problem is actually how they are going to get out of there. Meanwhile, in the Demon King's castle, Eulymenes informs his lord that Fleo and his companions may have left the kingdom after long investigations without finding him. However, Gozel believes that even if Fleo doesn't have the power for that, since teleportation only allows travel to places the user has already visited, and the adventurer hasn't had time to leave Clyrode yet as he arrived recently. That said, Eulymenes gathers courage and confides that it is not a good idea to focus on searching for the adventurer instead of advancing with the army against the humans because even though the purification is powerful, they are certainly capable of leading the magical beasts in an attack and filling the land with militium again, to pave the way for the evil forces to the castle of Clyrode. Facing this, Gozel stands up and recalls that the man is capable of using purification alone. Therefore, even sacrificing magical beasts to pave the way, Fleo manages to purify everything and everyone without assistance, so he needs to be the priority. Then Euliminus makes it clear that he won't be able to silence those who oppose the Demon King, and he affectionately touches the servant's head, apologizing for the trouble he's been causing her recently, but he won't break his personal principles. After all, he sees no point in the forced sacrifice of comrades to conquer humans. In the meantime, a woman spies on the conversation between the two. Without wasting time, she returns to Uegard, Gozel's brother, and informs him of what he intends to do. Uegard can no longer tolerate his brother's behavior in this matter because Gozel intends to further restrain the attack and even enlist a human in the army. The one explains that this human has the gift to be a great hero, but Uegard doesn't want to hear any arguments because a demon's duty is to destroy humanity, not to carry it alongside in the trenches of war. Moreover, considering the way Gozel has been acting and leading the demons, his younger brother intends to seize the throne for himself, leading the demonic forces against Clyrode as it should be. Somewhere in Clyrode, the center of all this discussion has just bought everything he needed in the market, including exotic ingredients from different places to try new recipes, which Reyes had been wanting so much. However, another sign of violation had been detected by Fleo earlier, although everything seems in order there. Since he hadn't seen anything unusual personally, the adventurer put that aside for now and continued his stroll with his wife in search of a good restaurant for lunch. Suddenly, on the way, they come across the sign of Pharaoh Holdy's shop, so he asks Mrs. Holdy if they are going to close, and she laments that they are because she couldn't find new suppliers in the city. The last battle against the Demon King's army destroyed the area where the main workshop offered products to her, and the transportation routes are in a mess because of these wars. After bidding farewell to the poor lady, Riz comments that the effects of war are felt far beyond the battlefield. Fleo sees that the new stores opening in place of the old ones show how resilient humanity is. Next, Balirosa approaches the couple and offers to pay for their lunch. Riz is already worried that their romantic lunch for two will be ruined, and indeed Fleo says there's no problem with the other girl joining the meal. Fed up, Riz questions what got into the woman to want to pay for lunch, so she says she rose a rank in the Adventurers Guild and now the rewards are bigger, and she thought of repaying in some way all the support she's been receiving from the two. Suddenly, Haya emerges from the skies, alerting the presence of a being with immense magical power, until Gozel appears once again in the midst of the city looking for Fleo. Once again, the demon shares the table with Clyrode's colleagues, announcing that he came after detecting some strange magic in this area. Furthermore, of course, he would love to talk to Balirosa. Hearing this, the knight wonders if her dreams are prophetic. Then, a wonderful fried fish arrives at the customer's table, and Gozel marvels at humanity's culinary skills. Before inheriting the throne, he used to eat things like this while observing humans. Although there are restaurants in the demon's land, their cuisine doesn't even compare to what's seen in Clyrode. Speaking of which, the demon asked Balirosa if she's a good cook, and as the human freaks out again with nervousness, Rise responds that she's great at making sweets. Finally, Fleo comments that Gozel's interest in humanity is great, and he emphasized that the prosperity of a culture is proportional to its military power. Balirosa points out that this is a way to keep an eye on enemies, and Gozel doesn't deny that, despite everything. Balirosa can't hide her discontent seeing that being deeply studying human culture, but with explicit desires to destroy them all. Again, the demon doesn't pull out, but makes it clear that there's a genetic issue behind this natural conflict between humans and demons. Haya adds that the bodies of these evil beings produce malicium, and the vast majority can't control it, exuding the substance even unwillingly. When many of them gather in one place, there's a risk of the area becoming contaminated and harmful to humans. Besides that, Gozel recalls that a good part of the demons value meritocracy and love to fight, so sometimes it's difficult to control the aggressive impulse of this type of creature. Anyway, Gozel apologizes for the inconvenience and says goodbye, leaving everyone pensive with what they've just discovered. On the way back home, Fleo reflects that he felt relieved when he was dragged into this world by not seeing discrimination against semi-humans, but at the same time, this society carries its own problems regarding that. Then the other girls find the rest of the group, and Blossom notices that Balirosa is quite pensive. Throughout the walk, Fleo realizes that the wall erected between demons and humans is even larger than anything in his old world. That's why he hugs Fenris tightly without saying why, just asking to stay a little longer with her. Meanwhile, Subiya and her great hero struggle to climb the hole they got themselves into until the girl returns to the surface, but her rear end disorients the man and makes him fall back into the hole. Hey folks, we're kicking off the new anime season, and if you enjoyed this anime and want to see more of it, go ahead and hit that like button down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to reach our goal of 70,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you next time.